Abai, missing letters. Early morning, outside the window, a generous wave of wind scatters the snow dust. It's not too much heated outside the room itself. The pillows, carpets, blankets are thrown next to a table. He could just throw a small, light scarf on himself. He didn't like it to be too hot in the house. Slightly cool tea in a glass of a good grade, and there's some sugar, pancakes and pies on the table. And of course, a book, Jitabai, The End of the 19th Century. He sits with a somewhat pale face like a man climbing to a dizzying height. He whispers something, mutters, and proceeds to the letter. He writes without stopping, without crossing out anything, without correcting anything. Turgal Kunanbayev, about my father Abai. The last word, a signature. Tomorrow, the next envelope will set off on its long journey. For more than a century, dozens of researchers have been trying to find Abai's correspondence. Who exactly did he correspond with? Where did the return messages come from? And where might the priceless autographs of the great poet be kept? Where was the first letter of Abai found? We don't have any of Abai's autographs in the museum. Who could the poet correspond with? Abai was about 25 years old when Michaelis and other members of Narodnaya Volya came to Semipalatinsk, to whom he told his tales. Read this with special attention and do as I said. Business correspondence, international correspondence, literary sensations and epistolary secrets. Abai, missing letters. Chapter 1. Message to a Brother. Omsk Cadet Corps, March the 8th, 1866. Today, Cadet Oskenbaev could not wait for a break for rest. The long-awaited letter had not yet been opened. Noble and respected, our beloved and dear brother Haliola. From your older brother Ibrahim and our parents, brothers and sisters, we send you many good wishes. From Abai's letter to Haliola. Greetings from everyone. I'm sending you money. I'm glad that you have learned a lot. Simple but heartwarming words like reminders of a distant home. He wanted to tell Abai so much in his response. Here in Omsk, there's an excellent library, and he just did a few translations. The Omsk Cadet Corps had the second largest library in Russia. There was a wonderful, unique library. I was told about Haliola Oskenbaev that in the evenings he liked to tell the contents of Russian novels to his countrymen. And they listened with such interest, and they asked to record stories. Thus, we got notebooks with a free translation of the works of Turgenev, Lermontov, and Tolstoy. Grigory Potanin. Neither Potanin himself nor his fellow student Shokan Balikanov could have known Abai's younger brother personally. They graduated from Omsk Cadet Corps almost 15 years ago. In the Cadet Corps, there's also little data about Haliola Oskenbaev. There's practically nothing in the archive, only student records. He studied for several years, first in Omsk until 1867, then in St. Petersburg. Did Abai write just one letter? There's a version that brothers wrote to each other letters almost every month, and sent not only letters but even parcels. mostly books, the poet's relative, the son of Kakitai Kunanbayev, Arkham Iskakov, wrote about this in his memoirs. When Abai died, he was 19 years old and he left some memories. However, documentary evidence of the numerous correspondence of two brothers has not yet been found. The writer Dombrovsky mentioned that Auezov managed to find 6 autographs of Abai. Mukhtar Omarkanovich himself complained more than once no written evidence could be found. We don't have any of Abai's autographs in the museum. All that have been preserved are in Semipalatinsk in the State Museum of Abai. The museum, of course, has a copy. The original of this letter was discovered by the Orientalist Margolan in the archive of the Orientalist Berezin. It is still kept there, on the Palace Embankment in St. Petersburg in the Institute of Oriental Manuscripts. And again, non-random turns of fate. Alkay Margolan was looking for documents related to Valikhanov and discovered the autograph of Abai. He was unable to publish it immediately. It was at the end of the 1930s at the time of the repression. The years of Great Terror, as they're called, were in 1937 to 38, and the third wave begins in 1946 when our intelligentsia suffered, including Kuanish, Satpayev, Mukhtar Auezov, and Ermokan Bekmakanov. So, Margolan did not take risks. Abai's cryptic letter laid for over 20 years. When did Auezov learn about it? They studied at the same institute, communicated well, and perhaps Alkay Margolan shared his news with a friend. A literary sensation was introduced to a wide audience in 1959. The only autograph of the great poet for many years, and so far, the earliest. But where are the remaining messages of Abai to his brother? Who else could Abai have sent letters to? And what stories are told about the poet? Chapter 2. Correspondence of Friends. Perhaps this letter to Haliola was the only one. Abai has no time to write letters. From 1863 or 64, the data varies. He's a candidate, that is, an assistant to Kudaiber Kunanbayev. At this time, he headed the Kuchuk-Tobiktinsky Volost. The elder brother didn't serve the remaining 3 months to reach the end of the 3-year term. He died in April 1866. Surely this sad news was sent to Omsk. But who wrote or whether there was a letter is unknown. A father at the age of 20 was elected an assistant to the Volost of Kudaiberdi, an older brother. After the death of Kudaiberdi, the rivals wrote complaints indicating his youthful age, and my father was removed from office. Turgul Kunanbayev, about my father Abai. They didn't take him away from service right away, the Central Archive of Kazakhstan. Here are stored reports endorsed by the Volost governor of Kuchuk-Tobiktinsky Volost, Ibrahim Kunanbayev, in 1867. Abai, like his father Kunanbai, continued the work of governing people with dignity. He was Sergeant Major or Volost governor 3 times. No personal letters have yet been found in the Central Archive. Researchers found documents of an official nature only. Therefore, these are only assumptions. With whom could have Abai corresponded at the time? We must once again carefully review the archives of Omsk, Orenburg, St. Petersburg, and Moscow, as well as the archives of Tashkent. Then something is likely to be found. 1871. Much has happened over the years. Haliola's younger brother died of tuberculosis. The name of Abai, as a fair and witty bey, is famous far beyond the borders of his native region. The poet already has 6 heirs, made new acquaintances. Abai was about 25 years old when Michaelis and other members of Narodnaya Volya came to Semipalatinsk. According to a historical dossier, the native of St. Petersburg, Evgeny Michaelis, is the only 4 years older than Abai, a member of Narodnaya Volya. The student led a secret club. He was well acquainted with Chernyshevsky, Nekrasov, and Mendeleev. It is believed that the main character Bazarov of Turgenev's novel Fathers and Sons was based on him. In 1861, he was expelled to Siberia. In 1869, he moved to Semipalatinsk. In the novel The Path of Abai, Michaelis is easily recognized as the hero with the surname Mikhailov. And everything else, appearance, character, and facts of the biography, coincide with reality. They met in 1870. Exactly how is unknown. It's known that already at the end of 1871, Michaelis is visiting the village of Abai for almost 4 months until April the 26th of the following year. From that wintry day, only the foundation remains. But for sure, as in Zhidabai, it was cozy and always welcoming to guests. In life, as in a novel, friends really often came to the village of Abai. This is evidenced by contemporaries, stories and archival records. Of course, they talked about everything. They talked about new books, poems, women, and about politics. Perhaps Abai even taught Michaelis his favorite games, Turgus Kumalak and drafts. He could play with rivals day and night. He was very passionate. He even arranged tournaments. A small digression, a funny case. There are some recollections that merchants who came to them played drafts very well, and everyone who played with him lost. Still, they found a man who could beat him. And then, laughing, Abai asked, "How did you manage to beat him?" It turns out he had large nostrils, and, he says, he hid an extra stone in one of his nostrils. Perhaps Abai also spoke about this incident to a letter in Michaelis. During 4 months, they became friends. For many years since he lived in Semipalatinsk, they were friends and often met. They met in Semipalatinsk and later in Uсть-Kamenogorsk. Michaelis was forced to move there. The rest of the time, they constantly corresponded between each other and exchanged books. At the end of the letter, Yevgeny Petrovich reported that he himself had been dismissed from service by secret order. "These are the miracles happening in the world, Ibrahim. Although life is good in Ash-Shorki, it would not hurt if you came to the city and found out about everything yourself." Mukhtar Awezov, The Path of Abai. It's the beginning of the 80s and the 19th century in Semipalatinsk, now Semey. The poet actively collaborates with the Statistical Committee. It was created in 1878. Intellectuals, scientists, Russians and other exiles, all who came here, they had a large community. Abai talked with them and affected him. They were united by a common interest in jurisprudence. Gross was a candidate of law. Leontiev was a lawyer who, due to exile, couldn't finish school. Abai was recognized authority in the field of steppe law, the result of close communication. Materials for the study of Kazakh legal customs. Perhaps the poet can safely be called the co-author of the publication of Gross and Leontiev. But could the work process go without constant correspondence and communication? It's especially interesting how this correspondence went with the Russian exiles. For sure, they wrote too. The man who became another close friend of Abai was also a Polish exile, Nifont Dolgopolov. In the novel, The Path of Abai is Fyodor Pavlov. They were really close. There is also documentary evidence of this. He asked the Governor General for permission to improve his health, and Dolgopolov had lung problems. He asked to be sent precisely to the village of Abai in order to be in clean air and healed with kumus. Thanks to this man, Abai's material wealth was preserved. From Akshoki, Dolgopolov brought an ethnographic collection to the recently opened museum. The poet himself couldn't move, his father died. Today, these artifacts are the most important value in Sume's museum complex. Those items that Abai passed on in 1885 to the local history museum are his personal items. Because he would not have collected them for the Museum of Local Law from the entire steppe, he was a wealthy man after all. In the epic of Mukhtar Awezov, the poet was friends with Dolgopolov until the end of his life. Most likely, it was like it was written, and they continued to be friends at a distance, by correspondence. The exiled Pole left Semipalatinsk in 1886. So where can we find the letters between the friends? And what did Abai encrypt in his message to his son? And what role does a happy chance play here? Chapter 3, Written Quest. Pushkin, Darwin, Navai. Oriental poets coexist with the works of Russian and foreign classics and encyclopedias. The silence and only the clock ticking slowly measures already pages that are read. This is the original. Here, Kazakh decoration is combined with European furniture. Abai sat here. On the table there's an inkwell and a pen. He had to write a lot, and here is a real confirmation of this. Another priceless artifact, even though it's a copy. The original is in the vaults of the Abai Museum in Semey. The document is over 120 years old and needs special storage conditions. Abai's letter to his son, a copy of course, but is this really the poet's handwriting or a dictated message? By then, he already had a secretary. Nevertheless, experts are prone to opinion. This is Abai's handwriting, a very unusual message, lines from a letter to his beloved son. The text is quite small and contains 2 quatrains. And Abai very warmly addresses his son, Magash Bala, Magash. Mysterious like everything connected with Abai, an encoded message or even a written quest in poetic form. He gives the task to his son to bring several livestock to the city. In this poetic text, which is contained in the letter, the number of cattle that he must deliver is encrypted. Think it over, Magash, my boy. The numbers are only 9 if you start with 1. Although it will look lonely if there won't be a 0 next to it. From Abai's letter to Magash. And then at the end he writes, in Kazakh, read this with special attention and do as I said. It's actually a wonder how Magash solved the riddle. In 1896, dates are not visible, the corner is torn off. Sent from Semipalatinsk. Is there really just one letter? I can't believe it at all. Most likely he wrote to other children. Leila Awezova spent several years in the archives. She was looking for documentary evidence of the events that Mukhtar Omakanovich described in his epic novel. She visited many archives. The son of Babai, Abdurrahman, studied in St. Petersburg at an artillery school, and she also worked in the military historical archives. Many scientists separately and in whole groups investigated the personal files and archival documentation in search of at least some clue, at least some trace. If they'd looked back then they would have found something. And now, since a lot of time has passed, it's difficult to find anything. Amazing Facts, a letter to Haliola, and how it turned out in the archive of the Orientalist Berezin. Or a message to Magash. How did it get to China first? Perhaps other epistolary artifacts are just waiting for their lucky chance to be found, and the search doesn't stop. What did Michaelis do with the correspondence? What archives have not been explored yet? And where was the heritage of the great poet hidden? Epilogue. Manuscripts do not burn. We have only found a handful of autographs of Babai. A letter from the poet to the Senate. An official letter on several pages. It reveals so much and is worthy of a separate investigation. Manuscript number 17569 is also a scientific note, a few words about the origin of Kazakhs, single, unique cases. Archive of the Eastern Kazakhstan region. Babai's letters to Evgeny Michaelis are unlikely to be found. He burned all his correspondence. Why? It's unknown.
Мы сейчас этого и не узнаем, потому что
We will not know this now. If there was an opportunity to somehow rewind this film of history, then we would get some answers to the questions.
прояснили бы, получили бы какие-то ответы на свои вопросы.
International correspondence. Dolgopolov, after Semipalatinsk, also lived in Nizhny Novgorod. There, by the way, he communicated very closely with Maxim Gorky. He spent the last year of his life in Astrakhan. Maybe some documents were saved there. The events that took place after 1917 that year, nobody cared for documents. They were just abandoned.
Документы были никому не нужны. Они были просто брошены.
Severin Gross returned to his homeland, the so-called Austrian Poland. Didn't he talk about what he experienced about people who became his friends? Did communication stop right after he came back home? And what is interesting is, we do not know or observe these facts there too. Even if written by hand of the secretary but dictated by the great poet, where is the epistolary heritage stored and is it preserved at all? There is a version that all the manuscripts of Babai are buried underground but still not found. To preserve their value, they were buried next to the graves of their ancestors. Descendants, students and friends also tried to preserve the legacy of the great poet, letters and of course the most important thing, his works. Many books, I know, were buried with people. Moreover, they buried not the person who died alone, but wrapped a book in a leather and buried it in another grave nearby. Another version, in 1903 the poet's house was searched, all correspondence was simply seized, and after that, the world's first revolution, then repression, much was simply destroyed. But manuscripts do not burn and do not disappear, they remain in the memory. as in the memoirs of contemporaries, that much has been preserved. Real stories about a real person, the great poet, Abhay Kunanbayev.